Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church, to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome back to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is Jason Broughton. Today we have back with us Dave Peterson. Welcome back, Dave.
Thanks, Jason.
We're looking at the gospel reading for the sixth Sunday after Trinity. It comes from Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 to 26. I'll read that in the New King James. Jesus said, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, not one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whoever says to his brother, 'Rakah,' shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, 'You fool,' shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Agree with your adversary quickly while you are on the way with him, lest your adversary deliver you to the judge hand you over to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Assuredly, I say to you, you will by no means get out of there till you have paid the last penny." Okay, so obviously Sermon on the Mount. In terms of what Luther has to say about this, what are your thoughts there? I thought it was a decent sermon in terms of explicating the text, but it wasn't like your kind of standard, let's focus on Christ sermon. He goes through a number of definitions, and so he defines what the righteousness of the Pharisees is, that is kind of hiding behind a very strict understanding of what the law is saying. So, you shall not murder. Well, I haven't killed anyone, and so I can hate him as much as I want and be active in taking vengeance upon him so long as I don't lay a finger on him.
Right. I do think that's kind of unfair in a way. And I mean, to be sure that exists, right? But I'm not sure they were all guilty of that, and I'm not sure that it's a common vice amongst our people, right? That would be that crass. I think I've often taken this as to be that to be outwardly good and to be serious about that is commendable, and the Pharisees actually are impressive in that they're trying to do this, right? So, but it's not enough. I've taken it a little differently than Luther in that. It's like, no matter how good you are and how hard you try, no matter how sincere you are, I mean, ultimately, you're not good enough, right? You have to have a righteousness that is still.
Yeah, I took his way of interpreting this in the way that the eighth commandment is bandied about in our circles. So, for example, we will hide behind the eighth commandment, so you can't bring anything up, or we'll say it doesn't apply to this because this is a public thing, and so we'll just do things publicly without perhaps taking the steps or having the churchmanship, so to speak, of going to that person to try to seek to understand what they're saying first.
Yeah.
That's how I understood him. And I think there's a sense to that, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't think that there's no Pharisees that are doing that, and I don't think that we're free of it either. But I think that at least at first glance and at first blush, I think you got to do some work to convince the hearers that they're guilty of that, because they're going to, and I mean reasonably, I think, going to say, look, I'm not trying to look for loopholes in the law so that I can hurt other people, right? That's not my normal operation. So I think you're going to have to catch them in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I hear you. So it sounds like you're saying Luther is reading it too darkly.
Yeah, I think right. I think he's reading it too darkly. He's not quite given the Pharisees their due. I think it's possible.
So you think that Jesus is just saying their outward righteousness is not enough?
Yeah, well, right. And even their outward righteousness isn't enough. And of course, we got some real bad actors there. But like, he's looking at the best people, the most pious people, the people that, right? He's not saying your righteousness has to exceed that of Herod, right? Mm-hmm. Or your righteousness has to exceed that of the Hellenists, He's like, look, here's the people. So I think it's a little bit more like what he means in context is, your righteousness has to exceed that of the head of the LWML. Or I don't know who's the most kind of pious and the person amongst us. It has to exceed that of Rick Stuckwish.
Yeah.
So I just said Rick Stuckwish is a Pharisee. That's what I meant. No.
Yeah.
No, I'm seriously. But no, I mean, I think Rick Stuckwish. I have deep admiration for Rick Stuckwish. For his not just for his intellect, but for his piety, for his gentleness, for his kindness. I admire him, and I want to be like him. Right. So when Jesus comes along and says Rick Stuckwish isn't even good enough, that's the kind of sense of it. I think at least in part, and I don't think Luther really touches on that at all.
But do you think our Lord's then explication of these commandments are indicating that same thing?
Well, I mean, ultimately what he's explicating is that we have to keep the law in its fullness, and according to, I mean, I usually speak of this as being the sort of spiritual interpretation of the law as opposed to the external, right? Right, because he goes, right, it's so hilarious that he goes, you shall not murder, but I'm saying it's harder than that, right? And I'm actually saying that violating the 8th commandment with an insult is just as damning as actually murdering somebody, which sounds hyperbolic, right? And I think that some of these Pharisees, like Luther seems to think the Pharisees know they're doing this. They don't care. They're pretending that if they kept it externally, that's good enough. They can use other means to get around keeping the law by getting other people to do their dirty work. And
but that I think tracks with what comes with regard to adultery, with divorce, with their giving of the korban. It seems like he's saying, like, to the general hearer, it has to exceed that of the Pharisees. And they're like, oh my goodness. But to the Pharisees, like, because they're part of this crowd, he's pointing out how they are misusing the law of God for their favor to hoist themselves up and push other people down.
Oh, yes. But I don't think they're doing it consciously for the most part. That's what I mean. I don't think they're.
What do you mean consciously?
I don't think they're calling their brother, saying "raka" to their brothers, and saying, "I can say raka to my brother all I want without any consequences because I didn't murder anybody." I think that they don't realize that. Okay, so take for example their concern with the use of the divine name, right? So avoiding saying Yahweh out loud as a way of keeping the 2nd commandment. I think that's a sincere effort on their part. It's foolish, and it's misguided, and it ends up causing all kinds of terrible things because it's legalism. It's not because that's what legalism is. They're taking the law almost too literally instead of actually recognizing the intent and the spirit of the law. But I don't think they're consciously doing it. That's the thing, right? And I think Luther, he's always reading this through, of course, the Pope and all of this kind of stuff. And I think that there are some of these Pharisees that are sincere, and they don't realize what the full demands of the law are. And I think that's more prone to what our hearers are going to be like. I don't think our hearers are going to say, I'm fine with the fifth commandment because I haven't murdered anybody. But I think our hearers are going to say, probably they're not going to say this out loud, but they're going to think, my intentions are good and I mean well, and I'm not proud, right? And I'm not vengeful. And then I think we have to get underneath that and expose how, in fact, they are acting in ways that are vile. Does that make sense? Because I think there's this, I think this is what happens with David, with Nathan, right?
So you don't think they're sociopaths?
I don't think they're sociopaths. No, I think some of them are. And I think probably Caiaphas, Herod, but I think the point of this is that the Pharisees, I think in this context, these Pharisees are naive and they are self-righteous in an offensive way. I mean, I'm not defending them.
No, I didn't. I'm just pressing to understand you better.
Yeah. I think that Luther sees it too crassly. And I think it's a kind of exaggerated, maybe it exists with some, I don't know, some in the Catholic Church at the time and, some of the abbots and so forth. But I don't think Luther was like this when he was a monk, right?
I don't know.
Anyway. I think the point of this Jesus preaching is a surprise. So when the Pharisees, so look, exactly, especially when he makes these adversative comparisons. You have heard it said, you shall not murder. And they're like, yeah, right, of course. That's what we love. We don't want to murder. And then he's like, but, I'm telling you, it's actually worse than that in a sense. I'm telling you that you are guilty of this and you've been doing it in ignorance. And your conscience has become hardened, and the law has become an excuse rather than an accusation. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the idea. Yeah. I don't want to be too hard on Luther, but that's just my response.
Yeah. He spends a lot of time talking about then who has been given the duty of using God's wrath. So office bearers, fathers, the state, pastors. But he, whenever I read him about this, he's got these really great, clean distinctions. It's like there's never any other kind of anger mixed in with, I'm a dad. And so I know what it's like to be rightfully angry at a child and employ, the use of discipline or punishment, but also the subjective feelings that go along with it.
Yeah. Well, we certainly have much more sensitivity to that than Luther did, right?
Well, I feel it, like even in doing this as having to do things that are like that as a pastor. There are certain subjective thoughts or feelings that go along with it, and it's one thing to objectively know the distinctions, but when it's actually playing out, sometimes you're wondering, am I doing this right or no?
Yeah, right. Because what you mean, I think, I think what you're saying is you're not able to do this without your passions.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And so there is a corruption but I think we're maybe overly sensitive to that, is what I was saying.
I agree. It's just, it's difficult to do that.
It is difficult. And Luther doesn't, I agree with you that Luther doesn't acknowledge that sort of reality.
He does insofar as, he'll talk about the pastor excommunicating, or the church excommunicating, is like, no one really wants to do it, but it's something that must be done. And the hope is that they will, repent and they can be received again. But this is not administration of personal wrath, but of God's wrath.
Yeah.
And the same with the state. Like, they don't want to have to do it, but they do it.
Right.
So it's, and so maybe that's the trigger of at least subjectively knowing whether or not you're doing God's wrath is, do you really want to, or do you not want to have to do it? And if you don't want to have to do it, then you must do it.
Well, I wonder too, why don't you want to do it? I mean, sometimes we don't want to do it. Maybe always. I mean, is there ever a good reason for us to not want to do it? I mean, isn't our not wanting to do it is because it's unpleasant and we're afraid of what they'll think of us, or how this will impact our, right? I mean, why is it we don't?
I mean, I think that's part of it, but some of it is like, this is a big weighty thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So,
like, okay, so if you're, executioner Hans, it's a weighty thing. You're taking someone's life and you can't go back from it.
Right. But I mean, isn't that then just a confession of weakness? It's to say, I don't want to do weighty things.
It could. Yeah. I mean, it could be.
I'm just trying to think. I mean, I hadn't thought of this before. But it seems to me that every time we don't want to do our duty, when it's clear from the Word of God, I don't know if there's ever a good reason to not want to do it. I mean, other than what we wish it didn't need to be done because we wish the sin hadn't happened.
Yeah. He acknowledges that in his sermon.
Yeah. But I don't know. I'm just wondering, whenever, we're cringing because we have to spank a child, say, I mean, just to keep it at the most simple, right? I don't want to spank a child. That's because, I don't want to be involved in this, because I don't want to be the bad guy, because I don't want the child to suffer pain. But I mean, none of that's really good motivation for me.
No.
I mean, yeah. I was trying to think if there was something that was legit in it, in not wanting to do it. Even the hangman. I mean, I wish it didn't need to be done. I think that's as close as we can get to a moral or a good sort of motivation.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And he does acknowledge that. He's like, no one
it's
desires
terrible
to have to do these things.
Yeah, but nobody desires to clean out the, chicken coop either. I mean, but that's a different sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think, that's what I was trying to make the distinction. Is it just that I just don't want to do something that, I don't want to keep running after, well, right away, actually. Right. Is it just that I don't like the discomfort, or is there, what makes me not want to carry out my duty? That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. Well, that might be legion.
Yeah, it probably is. But are there any legitimate, like, if I don't want to clean out the chicken coop because it stinks, that seems to me like that's just weakness and just a desire to avoid discomfort. It doesn't seem to me that there's any legitimacy in me not wanting to do that. It seems like not wanting to spank a child is a different kind of category. That's what I was thinking about. I don't, maybe it isn't though.
Yeah. His example is Adam in the garden, excommunicating
Cain.
Cain, thank you. All I could think was Abel, and I couldn't think of Cain. So he says, no matter how much Adam had loved him as his natural and, after Abel's death, his only child, he still speaks the severe and dreadful verdict on him. The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the earth, because of which you are cursed on the earth. Likewise, you will be restless and a fugitive on the earth. Those are very angry words and deeds. And with these words, he most seriously excommunicated him, and in addition, outlawed him and banished him from heaven and earth. He immediately takes up the consequence or fulfillment of this strict wrath and pushes him away, so that nowhere would he have a safe place to stay. stay. Without a doubt, he was not happy to do it and would have preferred to keep him. However, God's wrath must continue and in addition consign him to death and the fire of hell. And then he says the Christian church must also do this when it excommunicates someone, gives him to the devil, and refuses him the sacrament and all fellowship, so that it does not share in his sin. This indeed is a frightful verdict and a dreadful wrath, and yet it is not man's wrath, but God's wrath. The church would much prefer that man be converted and saved, as she also does. For when he is converted, then she receives him as her dear son and rejoices over him together with all the angels, as Christ says about the lost sheep and the depraved son.
Well, there you go. He does have this a couple paragraphs later, this thing about hating the sin but not the person. Did you catch that?
Yeah. So, thus I distinguish between the person and the sin by helping the person and restraining the vice.
Yeah, you're right. I'm angry. I'm angry with the person because that he will not leave his sin, but I love the person is the idea. Yeah, no, that is a legitimate distinction and an important one, I think.
It is, but we use it.
I know.
Right? Like this is the Pharisee thing, right?
It is.
I use it to ignore. And so he says, I do as much as I can with admonishing, warning, threatening, and rebuking in order to turn him away from it.
Right. Yeah.
And we leave out that second part.
We definitely misuse. Well, what we do is we abstract the sin away from the person, I think. So we act as though the sin and the person are two different things completely. Mm-hmm. And, there is an intellectual distinction that we need to make between them, and we don't hate the person for whom Jesus died. At the same time, we do recognize that a person did this,
Yeah.
I was using this because I really hate this excusing instead of confessing. And I was thinking about this sort of, like we excuse pastors because, well, they're only human, they're not perfect. And it's like, if I just imagine this pastor with a pocket knife, stabbing his members in the eye while they're sleeping. And then, and then us saying, well, what were you doing? And he says, hey, I never said I was perfect. Right? I was like, totally. Look, yeah, we didn't expect you to be perfect, but, we thought you wouldn't stab people in the eyes. And it seems like, that sometimes it's not really a confession of sin, and it's a lack of humility that, it doesn't want to accept rebuke or responsibility for its behavior. And I think, we're like, well, we hated you stabbing people in the eye, but we still love you. It's a little more complicated than that. Yeah, you're the one that did this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that is a kind of modern, I don't know exactly. I think it's abstraction, though. I think we separate into these and compartmentalize in a way that's unhelpful. But nonetheless, Luther makes that distinction, and it is a valid distinction.
Yeah. Well, then he goes on and he says, nevertheless, we need again to take care here that a villain not be lurking in the background and mixing in his own wrath. Right. Our wrath should be so completely absent that none of it at all is to be found, and nothing more than God's wrath is active, either from the office assigned or from brotherly love, which is also God's wrath. It is also God's command that we admonish, rebuke, improve, and help our neighbor to leave his sins, and that he receive it gladly and with thanks. This is the wrath of ordinary Christian love, about which Christ says, if your brother sins against you, rebuke him between you and him alone. So I think that's where our people struggle.
Right. I agree.
The thing I was describing before in terms of like the subjective feelings, we don't know how to distinguish God's wrath from our own.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Go ahead.
And that would be a very good sermon, but like, where's Jesus?
Yeah.
Like, where's the gospel in that sermon, right?
Right. Well, this isn't a heavy gospel section. I mean, you've got gospel in this that he came to fulfill the law, right?
Yeah.
And you've got that's really it. That's really the only. There really isn't any other gospel in this whole pericope.
Yeah. So okay.
in the
so
promise,
if you were going to preach about the fulfilling of the Ten Commandments that Jesus accomplishes. And then specifically in this discussion of murder and wrath, how would you help the people distinguish their own subjective wrathful wrath from God's objective wrath and what their duties are for that?
I think that for the most part, wrath is self-righteousness. So our personal and inappropriate wrath is a kind of judgment against others that wants vengeance rather than seeks that other person's honor and salvation, right? It wants recompense. And so that I think we have an anger that is, well, I think, okay, so for example, these people that, or, when people try to boast about being on the right side of history, for example, I mean, that is just a really hubristic statement, as though we have sort of, perfect wisdom and know what, and as though, I mean, the right side of history, that's a ridiculous thing, right? We want a righteousness before God that exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, not the good opinion of the history professors at Harvard. And so I think anytime we're kind of, I think wrath is just self-righteous is what it comes down to. The difference between God's wrath and our wrath. God's wrath is trying to make the world right. I think our wrath is self-righteous. That's my opinion.
Okay. So self-righteous in what way? Like in defense of ourselves?
I think it's typically a desire for vengeance. That's the difference. We want vengeance. We don't want the other person's, right? I don't want to just remove the speck from the other guy's eye. I want him to be publicly humiliated.
We want our pound of flesh.
We want our pound of flesh.
What's the epistle reading?
Romans 6. So so this whole Sunday is law heavy, right? So you've got we're supposed to actually live as the baptized, which means in the newness of life. We're not supposed to be ruled by sin, right? Because if you've died to sin, then you're free of it. You're freed of sin. You're not freed of the law, right? So I wanted to talk about first of all, why preach the law, right? The Lutheran dogmaticians say Christian sermons should be more law than gospel. At least Gerhardt and Reinhold Pieper say that. And that's because they understand that the Christian needs the law's instructions to keep the faith. That is because sin is dangerous to faith, undermines faith, and threatens to destroy it, and also so that they would have the goodness of this world that the law brings, right? Because sin, the first problem is it's dangerous to faith, but the second reality is sin also causes unnecessary suffering and pain, and the law does, in fact, provide solutions for that. So we have Exodus 20, 1-17 is the Old Testament reading. And I just love this. I think it's so beautiful. And there's some things that I think sometimes go unnoticed. And it's very useful and helpful to read the Ten Commandments in the context that they're given, at least on occasion, instead of just, rattling off the Ten Commandments distinct. So the first thing to notice, I think is very important, that the first word is, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And of course, lots of hay has been made about this. This is not the Greek word for commandment, in Greek entole, but this is the word Torah. Or I'm sorry, this is the word devar, which just means word. So these aren't really 10 commandments in the strict sense. They're 10 words. And I really think that the first word is, in fact, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, which is not technically a commandment given to men for obedience, but is in fact just a statement of fact and a promise. And I understand the 10 Commandments. I've said this a bunch, but I actually think that Exodus 20 is establishing a constitutional monarchy. And so the first thing is, I'm the king. Here's what I've done for you, right? I brought you were slaves, and I rescued you at deep and terrible cost to myself. And now here is the way that you're going to live in my house, not as slaves because I brought you out of bondage, but these are the household rules for sons. So here's who I am. I'm the king. Here's how you live in my kingdom, right? And here's what I do for you. I rescue you and I give you my inheritance. And these rules, so the difference between rules for sons as opposed to slaves is that rules for slaves are meant to keep them in slavery, such as don't teach them to read, right? So rules for sons are meant to enable them and prepare them to take over the family business or farm, right? So slaves are forbidden from reading. Sons are required to read. And not because it's some kind of punishment, but it's because it's bringing them up in the family way, right? How to be like the father.
I mean, you do, though, throughout Exodus have that play on the word slave.
Yeah.
Delivering them from slavery to be a slave to me.
Sure. But here, I think the contrast is that the rules aren't. This isn't, instilling servile fear, right?
Sure. I mean, yeah.
But I agree with you, of course. And Paul does that
there's
too.
There's a change of ownership, right?
Yeah, and but the difference between being, I think, when we speak of being a slave to our Father, it's a hyperbolic and metaphoric expression of extreme obedience. It's not of fear of punishment or oppression, right? So we can
it all
use that
depends
language.
on the master there, right?
Right. That's why I said of the Father, right? If we're in the Father's house, it's hard to tell the difference between a son and a slave when they're children, right? Paul gets into this too in Galatians.
Right.
But there is a huge difference. So we can sort of speak that way. And there's New Testament language that way also.
If they were simply slaves, they wouldn't have gotten an inheritance.
Right. And he brought that, but he did bring them very explicitly out of slavery, right? And the ideal is not that they be slaves. In fact, the rules about slaves in the Old Testament indicate how unnatural it is. God's people were not meant to be slaves. So you do get into slavery because of debt or because of war, but there are limits to it. And even slaves are given a day off, right, the Sabbath, and are supposed to be taught the Word of God and have the opportunity to worship, and they're supposed to be freed. You can't keep a slave for his whole life normally, right? So you have these years, and it doesn't pass on to their children. So there's all of these sorts of – so slavery is the consequence of sin and is a kind of wicked institution, kind of like the monarchy is too. So, this is a human reality, and we got to have to kind of recognize that. And then that language does, of course, get transferred to, you even have this, is Onesimus, what is, that's a great burning question, right? What is the moral force of Philemon?
I'd be reticent to say wicked.
Well, I think it's, I don't think we should be reticent to say that. Divorce is wicked. War is wicked. Slavery is wicked, right? These are things God hates. But we're not pacifists, right? And
No.
God hates slavery. God hates divorce. God hates war. These things exist because of sin and are even sometimes in the history of the world have been necessary, right?
Yeah,
How about
I know
the hangman?
specifically.
Go ahead.
I don't know that I would. Obviously, he says he hates divorce, and then allows it. But do you think you carry that to the same thing in terms of war and slavery?
Yeah, I totally do, 100%. He's the Lord of peace. Yeah, he uses war for good.
Yeah.
And but again, it only exists, right? You shall not murder. You've just got all this, there's these. It is this strange thing that we're not pacifists, or even Jesus allows divorce even though he hates it, for these extreme kinds of circumstances, and I think
because he recognizes that the divorce has already happened.
Yeah, well,
the death has already occurred,
right? And I think this is war too. Peace has already been destroyed, and the slavery it comes about because the big thing for slavery is this debt. I think that the ancients would probably see student loans and mortgages as slavery.
Yeah. I mean, I think we still have. I mean, we have prisons.
Right. So that's another. Right. I
We
don't think
still
prisons.
have all of those sorts of things there. I guess what I'm saying is, I guess I'm not saying it's a good. I don't know if I would say it's intrinsically wicked.
Well, God didn't institute it. I would say God did not institute slavery. He institutes marriage. He institutes the government, but he doesn't institute the church. He doesn't institute slavery. He doesn't institute war. He doesn't institute. I mean, these are things that come up direct. Like he doesn't institute death, right? He's not the author of death and slavery and war.
I mean,
and
I would
divorce
definitely
and all
say it's
death.
not the ideal.
You got to say more than that. I mean, that is really, you got to say more than this. Isn't the way man was meant to live. The Israelites are not meant, God's people are not supposed to be slaves. They're not supposed to be.
But to
we
him.
are the free. Well, they're supposed to belong to him, but it's not really. I mean, there is some of that language, but that's not the real. That's not to be enslaved. Certainly, we're not supposed to be
Well,
enslaved
we're
to
getting
other men.
afield.
Anyway.
I don't know if I want to arbitrate this on a podcast out loud.
So the bondage thing, anyway, they're made to be sons. So then you have these rules. The first rule, of course, you shall have no other gods. And that it is interesting. If you look at the words between the commandments, right? So we have a pretty long explanation of the first commandment, which begins with, don't make an idol, don't make a carved image, right? Don't bow down to images. And then the summary, because I am the Lord your God, am a jealous God, and then visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, right? So Luther rightly understands this as the summary of all of the commandments. It is most explicitly tied directly to the first commandment, which, by the way, misproves Calvin's numbering of the commandments, because you don't put the summary after the second commandment. And to pull the idol language out as a distinct commandment was a strange way of doing things. We did our own thing, but anyway. So this idea here, no idols, that is no false worship. There is only one God because he's jealous. Now, the weight is certainly on mercy, right? I'll show mercy to 1,000 generations, but there's clearly a threat here, right? Those who hate him by idol worship will not be guiltless. And the monotheism, right, is essential and characteristic because there is only one God and he will not share, right? He demands worship, respect, honor, reverence. And if you withhold that from him, you are a hater, right? And you're damned. And that rolls right into the second commandment, shall not take the name of the Lord in vain, which also has an explanation. The Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. And then the third commandment, which has another very long explanation. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant. That's really the word slave, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So the first table of the law gets a lot of intertextual commentary, it divinely inspired and placed there, which is significant. And the third commandment and the first commandment get the most. And here in the third commandment, you get, of course, this long explanation of no work. And that is because of a reflection of creation itself. In fact, the third commandment actually allegorizes the days of creation as the explanation, right? You are to imitate the Lord your God who rested on the seventh day by resting and by then receiving this. And of course, I think here you really see embedded in the commandments the spiritual meaning as opposed to the external. Now, it's kind of impossible for us to read this, and it should be impossible for us to read this without the sort of recognition of the Sabbath controversies in the ministry of Jesus and then those that followed in the early church, right? Particularly in the book of Acts and that sort of offense, because of the abuse by particularly the Pharisees and the kind of legalism. But it is important at the end of this that the last statement made is that the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. That is, he took it for himself. So I really believe that this establishes the pattern of weekly corporate worship as the pattern of creation that is embodied in the life of Christians from time immemorial and going forward forever. I don't mean Sunday worship, of course, or Saturday worship. One day is the same as another, but the pattern is that we, made in the image of God, one day a week should have this day that is focused upon hearing the word of God and receiving what he gives. We can and we do worship every day. We read the Bible every day. We pray every day. We can go to church any day of the week. But as a kind of bare minimum, I really think this is significant. And it's such a kind of shocking and strange thing that it's a commandment to not do anything. There is the gospel embedded in this reality, right? That this is a time to receive. Mm-hmm. Then the rest of the commandments, the only other commandment is right at the beginning of the second table. We get the explanation. So fourth commandment: honor your father and mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. And of course, there we really see the benefits, the civic and temporal benefits of being aligned with the moral law and living according to the natural law. Right. And I think that we should understand this writ large as being a promise to the nation of Israel, as a kind of civil, right? If you guys keep the commandments, you'll be able to have the promised land, and you'll be able to stay in it, and you'll be able to have a temple in Jerusalem. And of course, we see that didn't last. But that is a kind of promise writ large to the community, but it also does apply to the individuals. And that is to say that, right, that there is a kind of peace that comes from living a life that is outwardly aligned with God's word and with moral goodness. There are benefits to that are temporal. And Pieper calls this the double promise. That the spiritual benefit, of course, is the forgiveness of sins that were counted as righteous, and we have the righteousness that exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, and we go to heaven. But there is also a temporal benefit, which is partial most of the time and often delayed, right, until the last day. But their works will follow them. And there is a respect and a peace and a gentleness amongst men and a fulfillment and a learning to be satisfied with what God gives if we're not covetous, if we're not murdering people, if we're not stealing. And that's no small thing. And that kind of has to do with, I said, there's two reasons I think we could say to preach the law. First, to warn people about what sin is and to help them recognize what is good. Because we're baptized, we should walk the newness of life. And sin threatens faith. It can destroy faith. That's the first use, or the first kind of reason. But the second one is because sin does cause unnecessary suffering and pain. And Christians do actually benefit deeply from thinking about God's character and the order of creation and how we fit into it. And there is wisdom for how you deal with your children and your wife and your neighbors and your government and the like. That's helpful.
Yeah. So how does that tie into what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 5?
I think that this upholds when he says that he came to not destroy the law, right? So the law is still good and it hasn't been destroyed. And it still has wisdom and blessings to bestow upon us. It is still beautiful. It is still true. It is still good. And we still need it. We need its accusations and exposures, but we also need its instruction. And then, of course, that's the other side of it. So that's the sort of that it hasn't been destroyed. But then, thank God, it has been fulfilled. Right? That our righteousness is not based upon the righteousness that saves us does exceed that of the scribes and the Pharisees because it's Christ's own righteousness. So the 10 Commandments are accusing us, but they're also teaching us. And the gospel, of course, is that he died for us and he loves us and he's fulfilled the law.
So then what does it teach us?
What's the law teach us?
Yeah.
It teaches us what is actually good. And it teaches us how to examine ourselves, to find the logs in our own eyes, as well as the speck in our brother's, to actually carry out our vocations. Right? When we start to actually I think one of the most brilliant things Luther ever said, right? Consider your station in life according to the 10 Commandments. Right? So he says that over knowing what sins to confess. But that also means then that considering your station in life according to the 10 Commandments shows you what good works to perform. So it's exposing the good works you've missed, right? That's its accusing function, but it's also establishing what is good. And we talk about this all the time on here, but right, to actually think about your station in life instead of thinking about the federal government and the war in Iran and the Missouri Synod's presidential election. I mean, let's actually think about what we've been called to, and we should change this. We should think about to whom we've been called. Our vocations are defined by humans, by people, right? Our duties are not to institutions, right? My duty is not to the family. My duty is to my wife. And a particular wife, right? I mean, it's very specific, right? To Jackie. And it's not to marriage, it's to this marriage, to this woman.
Yeah.
That is a radical idea and not unusual to our listeners, but important that it be remembered because we always want to sort of run off to we always want to avoid the actual hard things, the real things.
Mm-hmm. And those stations not only have people, but places, right?
Yeah, well, right. But I would say most specifically people, but yeah, those people exist in places. There is a kind of concentric circles, right? There is a hierarchy that is right to articulate and to consider that your duty is first to your wife, then to your children. Then it gets fuzzier, to your parents, to your
then it gets
your
fuzzier.
siblings. Well, it's hard to sort of say, it's very obvious to your wife and to your children. I mean, is third on the list your parents or your brothers, right? I don't know. It's there, it gets a little bit less precise the further out you go. Do we owe more allegiance to Canada or to Mexico? It might depend, if you're living in North Dakota or in Texas. But as you sort of try to draw those lines, and most of the time, they're not pitted against one another. So it's not as though we're trying to decide, do I feed my wife or do I feed my children, right? But there is a kind of hierarchy, and love your enemies and love your neighbor. Again, there's this idea that we're just going to love people far away while ignoring the people in front of us. I just wonder if the Missouri Synod should even be doing foreign missions anymore. Regarding, it's exactly this kind of idea. It's not that I don't think we should be doing evangelism or missions. I just wonder if the money that we pour into foreign missions is really a good investment, and if it's actually good for the people that we're asking to do it, right? To uproot their families, to make this kind of sacrifice, what this does to their children. And is it necessary in this day and age to have kind of career missionaries that do that? Most of our missionary work, I'm no expert on this at all, so I'm not, but it seems to me that it's pretty much been reduced to theological education, which seems fair because there's no more lost tribes in the Amazon that haven't heard of Jesus. So if we're doing theological education, and we're helping and supporting, sister churches in that kind of way, or other churches that we're exploring fellowship with or have asked us, could we just send over professors to teach for, 4 to 6 weeks at a time and let them live in America near their mothers-in-law? And it might be better for their families. It might be cheaper. And raise up, indigenous pastors in those churches to do that work there. Do we need to, do we still have this kind of romantic idea of foreign missions that is actually no longer practical and maybe too costly, not only financially, but also kind of for these families? And at what point do we sort of say, and I don't mean this in any kind of, let's just take, the Lutheran Church of Korea, which I don't think we got any missionaries in Korea. But, maybe the Lutheran Church in Korea should take ownership and responsibility for evangelizing Korea. And maybe we should take responsibility and accountability for evangelizing America, since, or at least Missouri, since we're the Missouri Synod. But I don't know. I just think that sometimes it's easier to be more concerned about what's going on overseas than it is to be concerned about what's going on in our own backyard. Yeah. And there's the danger of running to something that's more interesting and more and far away and has less accountability. I don't know. And maybe there's some colonialism that gets mixed into that.
I mean, there's probably a very mixed bag.
Yeah, probably. I've never been involved in it, so I'm really not. I'm really not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just wondering, and I am sincerely, if the model for mission work, I've seen, it's so hard on the families of these people we call missionaries, and I just kind of wonder if it's really necessary, if it's a necessary sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And I'm thrilled, and I respect these people willing to make these sacrifices, but we certainly don't want to make sacrifices unnecessarily. Mm-hmm. I'm impressed by these soldiers that go out and die in war, but I don't want to have them just dying for honor or for glory or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of things. So what? Things. Well, I mean, I don't know if I have answers to all those things.
Yeah, I don't either. But I'd like to talk about it. I'd like somebody to address it. And I think it should be I think it's a serious concern. And I think also we got to make decisions based on budgets. Money matters. Yeah. We don't have endless resources. You can't do everything that's good that you'd like to do or wish or is worthy, right? We have to make priorities. That's all part of it. So I don't know. How am I going to preach this Sunday? I mean, we did avoid, I think we did pretty good of not getting into our antinomian rant. This is a Sunday just built for antinomian rants.
Sure. I guess, yeah, I mean, you didn't go into the rant, but I mean, you talked about it to a certain extent, right? That he didn't end the law or, take it away, but he did fulfill it.
Yeah. Well, that's so, yeah. I mean, that is the verse.
It teaches something.
And it is such a critical verse too. And I mean, you could get into the distinction between, ceremonial and civil and moral law. And you could get into the difference between natural law and revealed, the revealed will of God. That could all play in here. Luther certainly was fond of preaching on the Ten Commandments, and you've got a pretty good Eighth Commandment stuff there with the Raka, and of course you got the commandments themselves in Exodus 20. So there's lots of material this Sunday. I just had a lady in here who's struggling leaving Calvinism. Maybe he's going to leave Calvinism, and she was telling me which was funny to me. She said, one of the things that she really wants in a church is expository preaching. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's funny. I was like, yeah, we don't really do that. We're really not expository preachers. We're really liturgical preachers. And she was like, yeah, I know. So that was funny to me because I was thinking about Reinhold Pieper says we should be expository preachers, but I don't think what he means by expository preaching it's not what she means, right? And
well, what does she mean?
She means, a preacher that preaches for 45 minutes, verse by verse, through a book of the Bible. Gotcha. And probably is going to be doing, a lecto continuous sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And that really, I mean, we don't We don't do that. We don't train that way. I don't really think that's the ideal, actually. I'm not even sure Reinhold Pieper is right when he said he means something a little different than what she meant, but I'm not sure he's right either. But that's another.
I've had people who are don't have a Lutheran background who come and will say that my Bible class is like their current pastor's sermons.
Yeah. I think yes.
And, we've talked about bringing more of Bible class into our preaching. So what's that line?
I think, I don't think that the expository preaching is sinful. I mean, and even look, you're teaching the truth of Holy Scripture and explicating Scripture is a good thing. I think that the sermon liturgically does serve a different function than simply doing that, though. And when I say bring more Bible class into the sermon, I mean sermons should be more didactic and more doctrinal. And maybe instead of saying, Bible class, it's maybe a little bit more like catechism class. But I would like to see more exegesis and more explication in our sermons, along with more doctrine. I think there's room for those things. The verse by verse thing, I think, is too cumbersome in a liturgical worship service, because I think a sermon should really, this isn't a biblical argument. This is more of a aesthetic argument, I guess. So I don't want to be like dogmatic, but my understanding of a sermon is that it's more like a speech, a persuasive speech, where it has one point, it has a thesis and then it's going to make an argument. And then, in the course of that argument, there's going to be biblical explication and there's going to be doctrinal things. It's all going to be textual, but it's going to pick a thing rather than, march us through a text in a way that, I don't know. Sometimes Luther does do that. And certainly we see that in the early, you see that in Chrysostom sermons, you see it in Augustine sermons. It's not unheard of, but I don't think it fits. I think the people need a thesis statement that then, brings that in. So maybe it's more like a 5-paragraph essay than a commentary.
Yeah, I don't imagine it as commentary, but I think you can still have an overarching thesis and bring that whole text to bear, explaining that.
It depends on the text. There are some texts that lend themselves to that. There are some that are just
and there are some theses that
right.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just being defensive, but I'm in favor of more exegesis, more explication, more text, and more doctrine. I think all of those are good, but that I would like it to be focused. I guess I think a sermon is a particular kind of teaching and a particular kind of speech. And I don't really like what I think of as expository preaching, the sort of verse by verse thing where it's, I don't know how to say this nicely. It seems to me tedious and distracting and just, I guess, kind of rambling. Which I think is okay in a Bible class.
Yeah.
And not, anyway.
So you had mentioned that sort of at the outset that I think you were talking about it in terms of not going on your antinomian rant about how when Jesus comes, he didn't come to destroy, but to fulfill. Is there a sense in which he is teaching what our relationship to the law should be?
Oh yeah, I think totally.
So what is that relationship?
I think he would say, I would think it's our relationship to him. It's our relationship to the word, which is both law and gospel. I don't think he's really making that kind of distinction as though we relate to the law in one way and to the gospel in another. I think it's the relationship to the person of Christ as he comes to us in the word. And that relationship is the relationship of a son who is coming to his Father and wants to hear everything that the Father has to say, knowing that some of it is going to maybe be challenging or even going to be rebuke and exhortations, admonishments, but wanting it because that's his language, his heritage, and his future, right? And so even in the sort of clarifying of, look, I didn't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. I mean, I think that our relationship to that is, tell me more. Tell me more about the law you didn't destroy and what it demands and what it expects and how beautiful it is and how orderly and predictable. And tell me more about how it's fulfilled, right? So I think that's our relationship. Tell me more. I just came up with that. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think.
What were you looking for?
I think by approaching it from that sense, like, because it seems like he's saying, you guys have the wrong idea about the law and about what God is doing with it. And he's trying to recalibrate how we view it.
Yeah.
And that can work on both sides. The Christian who thinks he's free from the law, he's recalibrating it. The Christian who thinks he's constantly condemned by the law.
Yeah.
Or any of those permutations, he is recalibrating how God interacts with us.
Yeah.
So that we see it rightly. Yeah, reorienting.
Yeah.
So how would you describe that reorientation other than the tell me more?
Well,
I think that's good.
Yeah, I think it's this would be the thing, is that we would not, the Christian, right, is not to be afraid of the law as condemnation in the sense, I mean, we should fear the wrath of God and not do anything against the commandments, to be sure, but we should also be eager to hear, right? So it's this, we're going to actually believe that the law is good. And, if your father is going to tell you a story about your grandfather, even if you've heard it before, you want to hear it again. And you also are expecting, right? Part of why you want to hear it again is because you want to make sure you got the details right. And you know from past experience that new details or nuances get added, right? Or that because of your own experience or because your father didn't tell you everything the first time. And so I think really, he's telling us our story. And sometimes our story is, we have to be smacked around a little bit, but we know from whom it's coming, right? It's coming from our Heavenly Father who loves us and has compassion on us. And we want to be strong and we want to please him. And so we shouldn't be, even when we're getting exposed, look, you thought I was saying don't murder, but I was saying so much more, and you're not doing very good on this. I think it's totally legit to say thank you. Okay, now you know what, you're right, and I didn't understand that fully before, but I'm starting to see, and I want to do better, and I can see the goodness and the truth in this, and I want to imitate it, and I'm confident because you're here with me. Right? It's not like you're, so I think about this with the testing, right? That God tests us. And the ultimate test of faith is the Lord's Supper. Jesus holds up a piece of bread and says, "This is my body." And it's a test of faith. Are you going to believe it or not? And some people fail. Calvin fails the test. So faith says, I believe that is the body of Jesus, and I kneel in submission to receive it for my goodness, believing he will bless me through it, because that's what he does, right? That's that test of faith, though, even though some people fail it, is not a trap or a setup for failure. It's like your father saying, how fast can you run a mile? And you say, I think I can run a mile in 7 minutes. And he says, really? I think you can go faster. And then there's, so he's pushing you, but then it's not as though he's like, okay, go. I'm going to start the stopwatch. You run as fast as you can. And then, along the way, there's a crocodile pit. It's not a trick. It's not a trap, right? He's doing this in love because he knows what you're capable of, because his Holy Spirit is in you, and he's running alongside of you, encouraging you. But that doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. Mm-hmm. And yet there is this joy in it that my Heavenly Father believes in me, that he's given me his Spirit and he wants me to do this. So when he says, don't say raka to your brother, that's not just an accusation. It's a kind of challenge and a test. And then we're saying, I can do that. I can stop myself from saying raka. I can be like Jesus. I can be strong enough to not cave into my passions, and I can turn the other cheek, right? Mm-hmm. That's this kind of just beauty and goodness and joy of being a son.
So how is he teaching us how the scriptures are supposed to be read or interpreted?
There's a good one.
Because it seems like you've got, you shall not murder, and then we think of just the thing, and he's including all the things that lead up to the thing.
Yeah, the standards are always higher. It's always
more inclusive.
Both. I think more inclusive has greater application, and and nuance and beauty than we first see. Yeah, that's that whole thing with it's as shallow as a child, shallow enough for a child to wade in, and deep enough for an elephant to swim. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is the kind of reality that he is giving and opening, that it's inexhaustible. Mm-hmm. It is pretty funny that Jesus is going to tell these lawyers, experts in the law, about the fifth commandment. What do they have to learn? How much more is there? And yet there is more. So maybe he's just teaching us again something, not only about the objective, bottomless depth of Scripture, but also of the joy of discovery and wanting to hear.
Mm-hmm. So what do you make of the whole leave your gift?
Yeah, we didn't touch on that. I don't know. I go back and forth. I mean, certainly it has to do with community and living in forgiveness and being conscious and aware of how we might offend other people, whether it's them taking offense or us giving offense, the compassion that we must have for our brothers, that we are living in a community, that we're not coming to the altar here. I mean, communion, as radical individuals with our own faith, mm-hmm. but those who have an accountability and responsibility. But I don't know. I sometimes, is he talking, does the altar here mean communion? It seems that it's applicable to communion, but I think it means the altar in the temple. Mm-hmm. And then how does that apply to us exactly? Does it apply to not receiving Holy Communion if your brother has something against you? Or is it just a metaphor in general to mean take care of this business right away and don't wait?
Yeah, and what is this something against you?
Yeah, right. I mean, yes. And would there? I mean, everybody would agree, to be sure, right? If you have this egregious, if you have this unconfessed sin, and it's causing great harm to your brother, and you're just waiting for an opportune moment, and maybe you should realize that it's, you need to get this reconciled before you take communion.
It seems like.
But what about minor?
Do you know that someone's angry with you?
Yeah. Do you know someone's angry? And are they rightly angry or wrongly angry? Right. Yeah. What if they're angry for you because they're Methodists and you didn't give them communion last week?
Right.
So I don't know. I actually don't know. I've never really known what to do with those verses.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure how to apply them.
Yeah.
So I've never preached on them. Maybe that's what I should do, make myself preach on them and try to see if I could maybe not solve the riddle, but maybe learn something. Mm-hmm. That'd be nice.
How would you know if someone has something against you?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's right. How would you know? So it seems like it's got to be pretty egregious. I mean, not public exactly, but it can't be a secret if you know it. What about if you know somebody should have something against you?
Well, I think that's
more
clear. Yeah.
That's a straightforward one. That's probably the more common one. We know we've sinned against someone, and we need to deal with it. Yeah. Well, there you go.
I look forward to that sermon that you're going to write.
Yeah, it's always fun to learn new things. I do learn new things. I forget old things, so there's always room for new things that way.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for your time, Dave.
Thank you.
We'll pick up at some point with another one.
Awesome. Thanks.